Hey gang, I'm Joe Edelman and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Tonight, why? Why is why such an important question, and why should you be asking why way more often? I promise to also do a Q&A before we wrap up, so of course start typing any questions. I'll do my best to answer them in the next 60 minutes for you. And by the way, if you're watching the replay, there are chapters listed in the description below so that you can jump ahead in the sections of the show that interest you the most. And if you are watching the replay, do me a favor, drop a comment below the video. Let me know that you were here. And for those of you that are here live, please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know that you are here. Let me know where you're from in the world. And already, I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff here while you're typing. Who do we got here? We got Alvin in Virginia. Ty's here in New Jersey. Cooley is here from Indiana. John in Michigan. Joe in Michigan. I got Joe in California. Let's see. Rodney's in Canada, Ontario. RG in Quebec. Ron and Philip are here all the way from Thursday in Australia. Robert down in Texas. Ben in Texas. We got Spinning Wheels in Arizona. And Kaylin in Vienna, Austria. It's really cool. See it on the map. Makes it kind of real. We literally got people from all around the world. And all of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I am going to work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes or so, okay? Of course, you know, it would help a lot more people find out about The Last Frame. Just do me a simple solid. Please hit that thumbs up button. Like, why is that so hard, okay? I mean, feel free to hit the thumbs down too, right? If you can't stand me, but then again, I don't know why you're here. That's kind of stupid, right? But by all means, hit that thumbs up. Let other photographers know that we're streaming live right now on YouTube. You can click the share button or you can share the link lastframe.live. All right, so I got a couple things for you guys. And for those of you that keep coming in, keep checking in here. I'll show you guys, some of you that just checked in. We got a cool little map going on here. So if you haven't checked in yet, check in. You're going to pop up on the map. It's kind of neat, but you can see we've got people coming in from all over the world already. And tonight we're gonna play around with this little piece of technology. It's something new that I'm working with actually for some of my presentations, but I'm gonna have you folks help me out a little bit with it tonight. And some of the stuff that I'm gonna ask you about is part of what we're gonna talk about. So look, some of the news stuff that is important to mention. ImagingUSA is right around the corner. If you're planning on going, the discounts on the hotel rooms run out on December, I think, 19th. And they're already like 80% full, so don't waste any time. Remember, I'm going to be doing 2 half-day hands-on programs on Saturday the 21st and then Sunday the 22nd, 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to be talking all about color. And this is honestly one of the most fun presentations that I get to do. It's a 90-minute platform presentation. We're going to talk about color theory, how to pick colors, how to use colors, and we'll even do a little demo with some really kind of fun color stuff at the end of it. I am going to be at WPPI. That's March 6th. I will be there doing a photo walk. It's called Posing Without Posing. I'm excited to do this one because you've all heard me talk about it quite a bit. Pose is a 4-letter word, right? But you still got to be able to direct your models. You still got to be able to get them to do things that you can photograph. So this is an opportunity. I'm going to take a group of people out in Las Vegas. We're going to photograph a model around the property of the Mirage Casino and Hotel and get everybody an opportunity to try this technique and see how it works. So I'm looking forward to that. And then in April, the Texas School, 3rd week in April. I'm going to be there for a whole week. And what's neat about that is you sign up for the week, you select your instructor, and you spend the entire week with that instructor. So really, really cool stuff. Basically, it's a deep dive into what I do. Definitely looking forward to that one. So one of the things that I did want to share with you before we dive into our topic tonight There will probably be more of these that will come out over the course of the next couple of weeks, but CNN released their 2022 year in pictures. And I've got the link in the description below the video. I'm also going to share it with you folks that are here live in the chat momentarily. I implore you, when I'm done, not until I'm done, when I'm done, I implore you to take a look through this entire section of this website and all of these pictures for a couple of reasons. Number one, I guarantee you that the Pulitzer Prize winning image or images for 2022 are in there. Every year, Time releases their version, CNN releases their version of Pictures of the Year, and every year we see amazing pictures. And I'm a nerd. I look forward to these every year. I dig through them. I study them. I got to tell you, this year, there is just some insane photography. And I know that I'm going to anger a lot of photographers by saying this. I don't care. It's how I feel. Look through that website. Now, I will forewarn you, by the way, some of the images are graphic and some of the images are disturbing, but they're real. They're news. They're journalism. That's real photography. I want you to notice how many of the images don't have rule of thirds, don't have Fibonacci spirals in them, all that kind of crap. But I want you to notice also how many of the images are compelling, emotional, grab you by the ears and make you not want to look away. And I want you to consider the conditions that so many of those photographers had to create those images in. Conditions of chaos, conditions of extreme weather, just extreme threat of life, all kinds of things. That's real photography, meaning these are photographers creating these images that have read their camera manuals, that know their gear inside out and backwards. Because in those situations, you will easily agree, they were not trying to figure out what settings to use. They were not trying to figure out how to get their camera to work. They were prepared. They were in the moment and they were engaged with their subject. Just absolutely incredible. It's incredible every year, but this year, there are just some absolutely brilliant images. So I strongly encourage you, and I don't just mean scroll through it and take a peek. No, I mean, set aside some time. Skip some YouTube videos this week. I mean, if you want, go ahead and turn me off now. Fine. Set aside an hour of your time, an hour, literally, 30 minutes minimum, and go through these images and really evaluate the images and evaluate what makes them work. And by the way, let me be clear. I don't care if you shoot portraits. I don't care if you're a landscape photographer. I don't care if you shoot products. I don't care what you shoot. You can learn an incredible amount about photography by dissecting these images. So that's your homework assignment, okay? I do have another question for all of you. Let me bring my little chart back up here, okay? So this one takes a little bit of reflection, but I want you all to answer for me. I need as many people to answer as possible. My question is this. In the chat, for those of you who are live, if you're watching the replay, you're not going to be able to respond to this, but by all means, you can leave a comment, let me know. But in the chat, for those of you who are here live, tell me, please, what aspect of your photography improved the most in the year 2022? And I get it. You still have what, like 2, maybe 3 weeks to still improve a little bit, but the bulk of the year's gone. We're pretty much done, right? So what aspect of your photography improved the most in 2022? Please drop your answers in the chat. And I really need this for tonight's discussion, right? So, and I'm gonna show you guys some cool stuff as we get going here and I get a couple responses in, but please let me know, okay? What aspect of your photography improved the most in 2022. I've seen composition. I'm seeing lighting. Keep them coming. Be honest with me, gang. And you can type in more than one word if you want, but let me know. Raw image processing from Neil just popped in. I got another composition there. Cool. What other things? What aspect of your photography improved most? Learning to slow down. Awesome. That's a good one. Connecting with subjects. Quicker editing. Cool. I'm digging that. Keep going. What else do we got? Lighting. All right. Kevin says directing. Awesome. Robert, working the shot. I love to hear that. More people need to really kind of focus in on that one. Coolly, willing to take risks. Awesome. Ron, lighting. Cool. Now, what? And by the way, keep typing. Seriously, please. If you're here watching live, please type me an answer, okay? Contribute to this conversation. Because I know some of you are thinking, well, what does this have to do with this why conversation that he wants to talk about? Well, because I'm actually going to give you some homework tonight. And you don't have to have it done in a day. You don't have to have it done in a week. But honestly, I would encourage you to try and do it between now and January 1st, okay? And you may do it over more than one session. It may take you a little bit of time. I will tell you sincerely, it is a task where the more that you put in, the more you'll get out. And here's what the task is, okay? And that's going to lead to our topic tonight. So for those of you that are waiting to hear all about why, this is the beginning, I promise, all right? Something that I have done the last few years with my photography, and I wish that I had done it for more of my career because I've found it actually tremendously valuable. And I've been encouraging other photographers to do it. And that is at the end of the year, I do like to reflect on the year that's just gone by in terms of my successes and my failures. And I do it in several categories. I do it in terms of my business, starting with income. But, you know, looking at my goals for the year, what did I want to accomplish with my business? How much of that did I? This year in particular, I took some big risks. I dropped all of my sponsors. Obviously, there was concern last year. Joe, are you going to really screw yourself over financially? You know, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to evaluate those kinds of things. But as far as my photography itself, I am going to look at my work and I'm looking for areas of improvement. Even at this point in my career, I'm looking, okay, where did you improve? Now, improvement for me may be very different and likely will be different than it is for most of you. Improvement for me is going to be little things, but little things that I've kind of been hyper-focused on. Little detail elements, things that I wanted to kind of evolve with my work, right? I'll look back at shoots that I was not ultimately that excited with. You've heard me say many times before, quite a few of the images of mine that you see, especially the fantasy portraits, the fashion portraits, when you see a finished image, you're actually seeing sometimes my second, third, even fourth attempt at that shot. I make no secrets about that, right? Because frequently, a lot of those ideas, the first time I try it, maybe I didn't pick the right lighting. Maybe the makeup artist and myself, we had the wrong idea for the makeup and it didn't really come together right. Maybe it was the wrong hairstyle. Sometimes it's actually the wrong subject for the idea, right? So it's a matter of kind of getting all the pieces to fit. It's like a puzzle. But what you need to do, you really need to do, is you need to go through your work and you need to figure out what are the things that you need to be improving on based on your successes and failures. And this is not about making any kind of New Year's resolutions or any of that kind of stuff, okay? It's simply about evaluating your work. Now, how do you really do that? Well, there's one question. There's one question that you always start with. And oftentimes you even finish with, right? And that question is simply, why? So, look, this is not the first time that I have talked about the concept of why. And yeah, Ken, I have to say, I think that you're having some buffering issues with the out of focus statement. And I've had nothing to drink, so I promise it's not, I'm not weaving all over the place, honest. Anyway, keep in mind, Ken, if you're, I see you're maybe a little bit older, so I'm not making any jokes, but like if you're blowing the image up really big on a computer screen to make it easier to see, or you're on a TV, this is only a 1080p feed. I'm not one of those people that's going to send out a 4K feed for YouTube. Like, why? So if you're looking at it bigger than 1080, then obviously you're softening the image, right? Okay, back to why. First of all, why is a word that, as a society, we are very lazy about. We are also very guilty of really trying to train our children to not use it. We get tired of kids, why this, why that, why this, why that. And so we tell them to stop. And really what we're doing is we're killing their curiosity. And the minute we kill somebody's curiosity, we also start to retard and slow down their creative development. It's another big reason why you know that I push back very hard against the concept of rules, because rules put you in a box and they kill all creativity. But the question why is so important for photographers. So for these pictures that you're going to look at the end of the year, as you look at an image, and by the way, don't just look at the images that you're really happy with from 2022. Look at the images that bombed from 2022, because you're actually going to learn more from them. But when you look at the images, the first thing is, why did I make that image? And then there are questions that go along with why that are very usable. And you may have heard of these kind of questions before. What were you trying to accomplish with that image? How did you go about doing it? What was the cause of the failure if it's a failure? And what was the cause of the success? So why, how, what, where we heard these? These are like journalism questions, right? But they're also learning questions. They're the kind of questions that lead to revelations, to answers, to better understanding of your own work. To just keep plowing ahead and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting without ever actually evaluating your own work. And please don't give me that, but I don't know what things to look at, or I don't know what's wrong with my picture. Then, man, sell your camera and go on a vacation. Like, legit. Because you're just lazy as crap. It's not about knowing. It's about having a damn opinion. If you can't look at your photographs and see room for improvement, you're hopeless. Like, literally, you're hopeless. Done. Now, to be fair, some of you may not want to improve. Look, I'm not, no insult here. Not at all. No, practical. Some of you may be very happy with the level of work that you're doing, and that's really all you want to do. Maybe you just take pictures on vacation for your wife. You just do some stuff for fun when you have time, whatever, and that's cool. That's fine. So obviously, I'm not talking to you when I give this pushback. But if you want to improve, if you want your photography to matter to other people, there is nobody watching this video live or on replay that doesn't have a lot of room for improvement. But you don't need someone else to tell you what it is. You have to look at your work. And I'll tell you right now, for me, the day that I stop learning and the day that I stop wanting to improve my photography, that is the day that this live stream will go dark. That is the day that you will not hear anything from Joe Edelman on social media, other than what I had for lunch yesterday and how I walked my dogs tomorrow. That will be it. There will be no photography. I will be done. Because that is a big part of what excites me about photography. It's the fact that after all these years, I can still find ways to make it challenge me. I can still find ways to learn from it and to experience the world with it. That is a huge part of why I do what I do. And when that stops, it stops. I'm not going to waste any time. I'll move on. And I'll have no regrets because I've had these incredible experiences. But It's not about meeting somebody's standards other than your own. It's not about certainly meeting a set of rules or guidelines other than your own. It's about looking at your work and asking yourself very simply, what could I do with this image that would make it even better? And you need to do this task not only with your good images, I said before, but also your worst images. And the good images may be a little bit more challenging for you to come up with that, what could I do? But there's always room for improvement. I can go through any image in my portfolio, any image, and I can give you a list of things that if I could go back and recreate that exact moment, I would do differently than I did the first time. That's part of evolving. That's part of growing. But on a bigger thought process, so that's your homework assignment for the end of the year, right? Evaluate your work. And we're not talking, look, I'm not big on, New Year's resolutions or any of that kind of crap. No, it's creating an awareness. It's creating an awareness for yourself of what are the things that you need to be paying better attention to in 2023. That's it. I am not going to encourage anybody to make a whole bunch of New Year's resolutions or any of that kind of stuff, because that's stuff's a waste of time. It really is. It's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy. Okay? So I know a lot of you will go ahead and you'll use the Instagram utility that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks where, like your 9 best or your 12 best. Well, okay, use that, but then you better go through every single one of them and figure out what would you do to make it better, because there is room for improvement. But it's not up to me to tell you what it is. It's not up to anybody else to tell you what it is. It's up to you to want to make it better. And if you don't, again, that's cool. Keep doing your thing, but don't torture yourself about, learning this or learning that or trying to improve. But you don't have pictures that don't have room for improvement. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here right now, period. Okay? So the bigger question or the bigger statement on why, though, is a reminder. Because again, a lot of you I know have heard me talk about why in many, many different contexts and under many, many different subject matters. Every time you pick up a camera, you should be asking yourself why. Every time you pick up a camera, why am I taking the shot? What am I trying to accomplish with the shot? What do I want to show? What do I want the viewer to think and feel when they see this photo? What is the story that I'm trying to tell? These questions, who, what, when, where, why, how, they are very important. Great photography, just like what you're going to see at CNN.com when you look at the 2022 pictures of the year, great photography comes from people who know their gear, who know their stuff. These people aren't walking around because some YouTube video said, I need to pay attention to the exposure triangle. No, they understand the relationships. There's no damn triangle in their head. Not at all. They're not walking around thinking, I got to get rule of thirds and I got to do this for composition. No. You know what composition is to them? Composition to them is a puzzle. It's a puzzle where you work to fit the pieces together perfectly to make an interesting image. What are the pieces? They're the elements of the scene that communicate the story. That's what composition is. Forget this rules crap. Once again, I say it over and over and over again. I'm not going to do the work for you. Go and research the history of rules. All rules do is make your photographs predictable and boring and just like everyone else. I know a lot of you are landscape photographers. The Landscape Photographer of the Year Award just came out. You can find them posted on all the blogs. DP Review, they all have the gallery. Go look at them. A lot of those images do not contain rule of thirds. A lot of those images do not contain Fibonacci spirals. Some do. But consistently across the board, those images that won, they are not your run-of-the-mill landscape photos. Not at all. They are different. Way different. And that's the point. Oh, Cooley. No, sir. Rules are not made to be broken. Rules were made by lazy, sucky photographers that weren't as, actually, rules were made by lazy, sucky artists that weren't as good as the masters. And they figured out if they created these rules, rules leveled the playing field. No, rules are not meant to be broken. You break the law, you go to jail. That's what a rule is, okay? Rules are taught by fools. Quote me, I stand by it, I'll prove it. And Cooley, you of all people, man, do me a favor, and I want you to think. I want you to think about pictures that you've seen in the last 2 months. Pictures that stopped you on Instagram, like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And I want you to go back and look at some of those pictures, and I want you to answer this question. Why did that picture stop you? Why did you say, ooh, that's cool? Because that person didn't abide by the rules. 90% of the time, it's going to be because they did not abide by the rules, because they did things that didn't meet the rules. Go to Google, type in iconic photographs, and then click on the Images tab. You'll recognize all the photographs, all of you. This is a good exercise if you've never done it. But I want you to notice something. So many of those photographs, many of them, no rule of thirds, no Fibonacci spirals, a lot of them are freaking out of focus and the exposure sucks. But yet, we hold them up as iconic images throughout. They stood the test of time. How is that? Because just like these images on the CNN website, they represent moments, important moments. Those pictures deliver emotion. They capture us. They capture our imagination. That's why they're amazing photographs. It's got nothing to do with some stupid set of rules. All rules do is make you like everybody else. So, especially, Cooley, I think you're trying to make money, man. If you want to make it harder to make money, you keep following the rules. You keep knowing those rules. Just the fact that you know those rules, you're screwed. Seriously, because they're in your head. So that means every time you try to break the rules, you're having to work extra hard. You're having to do more work to get outside that box, to think of something that doesn't fit in the predictable arena so that your pictures stand out and look different. You make it 10 times harder. So for all of you that learn the rules, the good part is I know you didn't learn from me because I don't teach them. Never have. So I feel bad for you that you know them. I know them, and I've had to work hard throughout my entire career to get away from them. But that's the easiest way. Follow the rules. It's the easiest way to have competition. It's the easiest way for people to ignore your pictures because they're predictable. They're boring. Right? So, why is a question you should be asking yourself about everything. But in order to be able to do that and make it effective, we're going to go back to the basics, gang. You got to know your cameras. You got to read those darn camera manuals. You have to know how every feature of your camera works. You have to be able to manage exposure without some stupid exposure triangle that doesn't do a damn thing for you. It doesn't work. It didn't work when it was started, and it doesn't work now. In fact, stay tuned. Right after the first of the year, I am going to give you guys an incredible history lesson that does not exist anywhere on the internet about how the exposure triangle came about, and you're going to be shocked when you find out when it came about. It's basically a big comedy of errors, and the internet took over and blew it up. There's no value to it at all. So all of you that pat yourselves on the back, it's like, oh yeah, the exposure triangle, I know it, shutter speed, aperture, ISO. Good for you. You memorized a completely pointless graphic. Number one, memorization does not equal understanding. Number two, those three things do not actually relate to each other unless you're shooting film. And even then, they kind of still don't relate to each other. I'm going to break it all down. But trust me, I wouldn't be that passionate about it, and I wouldn't keep talking about it so much if I wasn't able to back it up and prove it to you. And I will. Okay? So, let's move on. Honestly, short lecture tonight. That's it. So, we got some comments here. I'm going to go back and look at them. But seriously, you're here tonight. I haven't done this in a while, and I've been kind of itching the last couple of weeks. I really missed when we used to do the Q&As. I'm not going to lie. Like a full hour of Q&A and get into topics. So you're here. Why? Other than seeing me rant about something. What can I do to help you with your photography tonight? Let's talk about that. So just scrolling back up here a little bit. Where did these come in from? Let's see. Okay, so there I am in focus. Dan, I appreciate my wife's brutal honesty of critiquing my shots. Yeah, my wife's on the other end of the spectrum, and I have mixed feelings. You know, she's like, oh, everything's nice. Everything's nice. You know, she won't take my stuff apart. But where my wife drives me nuts with my pictures is I'll be working on an image that I'm not happy with, right? We all have those. I'm not happy with it, but I've got to deliver it. So, you know, I'm working on it. And that's when she'll walk into my office to tell me something, and she'll look at my computer screen and be like, oh my God, like, that's amazing. And I'm like, oh God. Yeah, so she supports my work very, very much, but that drives me nuts when that happens. Gravel Bomber, man, that is a username. I love that one. I must be on the right track. I'm very critical of my own work and see what I did wrong and try to pay more attention the next time before hitting the shutter. Yeah, and you know what, Gravel Bomber, you bring up a good point here. Only because I'm going to stick on one word. I completely understand what you're trying to say. So excellent. But that word critical, it's worth pointing out to all of you, right? Just to clarify the point. When I talk about looking at your own work and, you know, essentially evaluating what could you do to make it better, to have an opinion, right? It is very easy, depending on your personality. And this is not a, you know, oh, you know, you're messed up thing for anybody. It just means, look, we're all human, which means we're all messed up, right? Because we are. But for some people, when it comes to doing evaluation things like that and finding things that are wrong, okay, it becomes very easy to become overly self-critical. And that can become a really bad thing, right? So, you know, again, Gravel Bomber, I totally get your point and I appreciate it. But I just want to latch onto that word for people, that ultimately the goal is not to just kind of, you know, pile on yourself. And even worse yet, compare yourself maybe to a photographer whose work you admire, because you're not that photographer. So don't try to be, right? You need to be the best version of you. And the purpose for the exercise, again, is the word that I like to use is opportunity. You're looking for opportunity, right? So if you are a person that is potentially struggle with self-esteem, be careful. I'm not saying that you get a free pass and you don't need to do the exercise. No, you absolutely need to do the exercise. But you've got to be honest with yourself the entire time, and you've got to be realistic. Otherwise, it can become completely demoralizing. You wind up selling your camera, which would be kind of a really foolish thing to do when the whole task started out that you're trying to look for ways to improve your work, right? So, you know, all good things in moderation, right? That's kind of, you know, what it comes down to, okay? Let's see, Edward, when I take a picture, I try to communicate the story. And you know, again, the story thing, just to touch base on that, there is a lot of value to thinking of your pictures as stories. But let me explain, right? So you got to open your mind a little bit, be a little receptive to a concept, okay? It would be really easy for you to say, oh, well, yeah, well, Joe, he's really into photojournalism because that's where he started. So, of course, it's all about the story. That's not why I'm saying this, right? I will say that this philosophy for me was shaped by my early adventures in photojournalism. Yes, but even if you are a landscape photographer, even if you are a macro photographer, photographing an ant on a tree, whatever, thinking of the image as a story is a great way to make you slow down ever so slightly and actually pay attention to the details in the image. So, you know, I talk about no rules and composition, right? If you ever take one of my composition classes, you'll understand that the way that I approach I call it a practical approach to composition. And the way that I approach it is there are 7 or 8 kind of things that I routinely look for in every image. Now, I don't use all of them, but I look for the opportunity to use them. And so one of the things are, everything that is in the image, everything, you're responsible for it. So that means foreground, subject, background, all around the edges. You're responsible for everything that's in the image, right? Because you have the choice to include it or exclude it. And you can move or change your focal length, change your perspective, move up and down, all these things. So, by kind of having a story, what is this picture about? It's a great opportunity for you to be able to kind of work through the idea of, what do I want in the shot? What am I trying to accomplish here? Believe me, super, super valuable to do. I'm just looking here really quick. I believe I've already got it on my website. I do. So it's not until May. Here, I'll share the screen. But in May, I have a presentation coming up. It's No Rules Composition Techniques to Improve Your Photography. It is a virtual presentation. Let me grab the link. So yeah, we're a little bit ahead on that, but all of my 2023 presentations are starting to hit the website. Some of them are up already, up through May. They're listed. The ones that I'm doing on my platform, they will all be listed by the end of this weekend. I've got a little bit more work doing a few of the pages. So the whole year's worth of presentations will be there, okay? Let's see, I'm scrolling down here. Keith, I never want to be like somebody else. Good. Let's see. And Cooley, good. I like to see that. I'm asking why I'm taking the image and what am I saying with this image. And that's very good. And look, gang, I will tell you, let me be clear. If you're at a point where you're still struggling a little bit with your photography, no shame, right? But that's where you're at, this concept of why am I taking the picture and what's the story I'm trying to tell and all that, it might actually feel a little bit overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, because it's like more things that you need to think about. So in a way, if you're in that situation where you're still struggling a little bit, you're still learning, I've kind of just made it harder for you. I'll own that, right? But now I'm done apologizing. That's why you need to put effort into read those manuals, understand your cameras, understand the relationships between shutter speed and aperture and what you do with ISO. Those are the things that you have to get to a point where you are able to do those things essentially instinctively, right? If you're having to really put a lot of effort into thinking about them every time you take the picture, not gonna lie, right? It's gonna be really hard to think about, well, why am I taking the picture and what's the story behind it, okay? So again, it'll be right after the first of the year when I release the video on exposure triangle. I'm a big believer in the idea that any idiot can point out a problem. So it's really easy for me to dissect the exposure triangle, show you the history behind it to make you understand, oh yeah, this was really kind of an internet creation that just took off. And while on one hand, there is logic to it, it's false logic and it doesn't actually help you with your photography. So, okay, what good does that do you, right? Well, don't worry. I have the solution and I have a proposal for how I would encourage photographers to deal with it. And I've also got what will be a little bit of a controversial recommendation in terms of how you deal with it in your cameras. If you've been paying close attention to my conversations over the last few months, I've been testing out this way of shooting, and I've been doing more and more and more of it, not in the studio. So this is when I'm out of the studio. And I've become a big believer in it. So I will break it all down. So stay tuned for that. But I have a way for you to remember it, and a way that, again, you're still going to have to do some learning for the relationships between those things. But I've got a way that's going to make it a lot easier for you to remember how the relationships work. So we still got to get you through the understanding part, but I've got a better, more accurate way for you to remember it. So we will get to that, okay? Let's see, Sean, I appreciate your philosophy on improving pictures that I make, so I'm open to learning more from you. Well, good, I appreciate that. Kevin, one nice thing about the old Hasselblads was how their shutter speed and aperture rings worked and linked together, holding both, and the exposure stayed the same. Actually, I didn't know that they did that. That's actually awesome. Man, I wish my Nikons would have done that. That would have been incredible. But yeah, indeed, that would give you less focus on the mechanics and more on the subject. For those of you that maybe don't understand why that's exciting, basically, once you've gotten the correct EV exposure value, right? You know, it's very simple. Then you make an adjustment one way or the other, and they're going to basically be linked. Especially now in the digital world, that would actually be an outstanding feature to have. Outstanding, more so actually, in my opinion, than in the film days, to be able to link those two together and have them locked, so that you can go from there and then just worry about your ISO, which is not sensitivity at all in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Kaylin, recently I really started to slow down and pay more attention. Awesome. I also started using a tripod for portraiture. Good. Earlier, I thought, oh my God, why are those guys shooting with a tripod? Now I'm one of those guys. Yeah, and you know what, Kaylin? It's, first of all, that's awesome, and I'm thrilled to hear that. Ultimately, what you're going to find down the road is one of two things will probably happen with your tripod usage. You may stick with it forever, and that's fine. Well, actually, I should say one of three things. I'm sorry. You may completely burn out on it and go back to hand holding, but the best part of it is you'll go back to hand holding with a much better perspective on what you need to be doing with your tech, so that you're not rushing through things. Or if you're like me, actually where I kind of netted out with tripods is I use them sometimes, don't use them other times. It really depends on specifically what I'm shooting and where I'm shooting. And we're talking about like portrait work and people. It depends on what I'm shooting, where I'm shooting, that type of thing. But there is a tremendous amount of value to using a tripod for portraiture, provided that, so for all of you that aren't doing it yet, provided that you are getting your exposure settings together, get your lighting set for your first shot before your subject walks on the set. For any of you that are going to photograph people in a studio type setting, and when I say studio type setting, it could be in your living room, your kitchen, your basement. It could be in somebody's office. Doesn't matter. That's a studio setting. If you're setting up speed lights or strobes, whatever, okay? You need to have your first set ready to go before your subject walks in front of your camera. When I say first set, meaning your backgrounds, your lighting are set up, your exposure is set up and dialed in, so that that very first frame, when they're in front of your camera, that very first frame is just a confirmation. Everything's good. And then your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth are all functional frames. By doing that, there's things happening, good things happening on both sides of the camera. Your subject will relax much quicker because your subject is hearing click, 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 click. They're seeing you take pictures. If things sucked, you wouldn't be taking pictures. At least we would hope not, right? For you, the nerves are chilling out and the confidence is building because you took that one test, you confirmed that everything looks good, and boom, now you are making pictures already right out of the box. You're making usable pictures. That's awesome. It's a psychology boost on both sides, right? Then when you get through that and you're not going to shoot 1 or 2 or 3 frames, you're going to shoot 10, 15, 20, 30 frames to get the perfect expression. Then when you need a moment to adjust the lights or to make other changes, your subject's not going to get really nervous. Your subject's not going to think, oh God, they have no idea what they're doing. They're fumbling and bumbling, right? Because you've already established that confidence. You're just moving on to something different at that point. But the other thing too, and Kaylin, just make sure you do this when you are working with a tripod, especially, you know, if the camera's like down here, right? Make it a point to not be standing straight up all the time when you're actually shooting. Kind of bend over and get closer to the camera, right? Nick, thank you so much for the super chat, man. I haven't heard from you in ages. I hope all is well down there in Maryland. But get a little bit closer to the camera, right? But don't hide behind the camera. when it comes to portrait photography, the greatest way to build connection and to get your subject to relax is for you not to hide. Especially for you Canon shooters with these big, massive cameras. Now, but all of them, seriously, right? Here we are with these big cameras that are kind of like a gun and we're aiming at a person. And then if we hide behind it, it's like, oh my God, right? So you want to try not to hide behind it. But indeed, the further you are from the camera, people will tend to look back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then you make it harder to keep their focus where you want it. So you bring yourself to the camera and you want to be just a little to the side and a little over the top, right? And then if you find that the person is really struggling looking at the camera while you're talking to them, once you're actually ready to shoot, go ahead and just move behind it for the frames and then come back out, right? But avoid kind of standing like way off to the side or standing way up and talking for a couple of minutes and then saying, okay, now look at the camera, right? So do your talking lower. So my cheat is, since I'm getting a little bit older and I can't, I don't enjoy the up and down, I have a second posing stool in my studio. So if I am going to have any kind of a conversation once the person's on the set, I'll just grab the posing stool and I'll sit down. That way my head's right by the camera. So they're still looking right at the camera, which means they're staying relaxed. They're still basically in the posture that I want them in for the portrait. And then when I'm ready to shoot, I'm a big believer in not sitting down to shoot ever. And I realize some of you may have medical reasons, from physical reasons for doing that. Okay, fine. But I do not like sitting down to shoot. So, I'll sit down for that conversation piece. I'll still have a kind of a hand hanging out on the camera, but then I'll kick the stool out and get back into a position to do it. And part of it is because when I'm on my feet, human nature, when you're on your feet, you're more energetic, you're more animated. And you've heard me say before, I never tell a subject to smile. That's a bad word. But if I want somebody to be happy, you're my portrait subject. Okay, great, you look amazing. Now, I want to do these pictures with lots of energy and I want to get happy in the shot. So you're going to look right here in the camera. That's it, good. No, a little bit more energy. That's awesome. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm giving them the body language and the energy that I essentially want them to model back to me. And that's actually how our brains work. We tend to reflect the body language and the energy that we get from people that we're interacting with. So the best way to get those great expressions that have real life to them is you got to give the subject exactly what you want back. That's how you make it work, right? And it's just easier when you're standing. It's hard to do that when you're sitting, okay? Let's see, TC, now that I had the Sony a7 IV, it's forcing me to use manual skills I don't have, and I'm struggling. So, TC, tell me a little bit more. I guess two things. One, what camera did you come from that you weren't forced to use manual skills? And give me a little bit more specifics about how you're struggling. Seriously, I'm all in for trying to solve some problems. We got 12 minutes here yet, right? So, I think I'm caught up on questions. You guys are like just hanging out for the conversation tonight here, okay? So I'll tell you what, since you guys are all hanging out for the conversation, I'm gonna ask you another question just to test out this little thing that I was playing with before. So here's what I need you all to do while we're waiting for TC's answer to come back. Type in the chat, one word, what is your primary camera brand? So we're gonna do a survey of all the people that are here. So just type in, what is your primary camera brand? Because I know some of you use more than one camera brand, cool. But go ahead and type in the chat, what is your primary camera brand? And good, now we got a couple questions coming in, so I'll come back and I'll answer those. So go ahead, let's see, what do we got here? We got a Sony. I don't know why I picked up a hello from Austria, but that's okay. We got a Sony. What other camera brands? Really, we only got like Sony. That's the only one so far. What do you guys got going here? Where we got Joe, that's got to be Joe Dussel with a Pentax, all right? We got an Olympus. Okay. Cool. Come on, that's it? What brand are you using, guys? Type it in for me. Okay. Willie's just saying, wow, looks like we got mostly Sony users here. Sony and Olympus. All right. Okay. That's cool. So while you guys are typing, keep it coming, keep it coming. I'm going to scroll back here. In fact, here, I'll put myself at least back on the screen. And there we go. And Kaylin said, I'm doing the pre-shooting prep with my mannequin if I'm not on location. And that's awesome. I will tell you too, a lot of times what I've done when I'm on location is I will use a light stand as my subject. And of course, you know, that's all well and good for focusing and all that kind of stuff, but there's really not much there to get a sense of the exposure. I will look for something to drape over the light stand. Maybe I have a hat, you know, in my car that I'll take in with me, or a lighter colored jacket. If I think of it in advance, I'll just pack kind of like a creamy colored shirt in my bag, because like a t-shirt, right, that I can just drape over it. That gives me something that I can use to kind of replicate skin tones from the sense of, is my exposure good, and where are my lights hitting and where the shadows falling. So, because sure, obviously we don't want to take, you know, a mannequin on location. That would be a little weird probably for the clients. But yeah, you can kind of replicate it to achieve what you need with a light stand and you know, something kind of just draped over the light stand. Okay. All right. Nick does have a question, and I missed it. Nick, I'm sorry. Where did your question come in here? Nick, did you type the question early on? Let me go back through again. I saw your super chat, which I greatly appreciate, but Nick, I am not. TC, I'm waiting for your answer too here. I'd love to try and help you out. How far up was your question, Nick? I'm scrolling way back here now. If it was in the beginning, that's probably why I missed it. Let's see. Still checking here. Nick, I don't see your question, man. Do me a favor and retype it, okay? And I will, obviously, I will gladly answer it for you, okay? So let's see. Cooley shooting with the D750. Cooley, you're not TC, are you? Who's TC? Let's see. No, Nick, I'm sorry. I'm not seeing your question. So do me a favor, retype, and I will gladly get it for you. John Truitt, when I was assisting, I was just standing in for many shots. Yeah, when I was in high school and junior high school, when I was, you know, working for the studios and that after school, that was always my job. You know, even in the studio, I was, you know, the test subject. But obviously there was no, you know, digital readouts, but I was the guy that would sit there so that they knew exactly where to hold the light meter, and so that they could look at the lights. I'm not kidding. The portrait studio that I first worked with as a teenager, I was like 13 years old. The lights were the silver reflectors like you can buy at like Home Depot now. The only difference was they didn't have the clamp. They actually sat on a light stand, and the big tungsten bulbs that actually stuck out the front of the reflectors. And then they would use the same kind of diffusion paper that they use in Hollywood, because it could withstand the heat. You still couldn't let it get too close, but if you curled it over, it could handle the heat, and that's how they would diffuse them. So yeah, I was like kind of the stand-in for much of that. Okay. Rob said here, I'm doing a corporate dinner party at a restaurant. His first. Well, first of all, Rob, for anybody that's ever done that before, they'll understand. My sympathies to you. Should I take pictures of the people eating? Any other tips on what to capture? So actually, Rob, that's a really good question, but I would be careful about asking anyone other than the client. My general assumption, so right away, that's a bad word, right? My general assumption is in a gig like that the client's not going to want pictures of the people doing two things. One, eating. Two, drinking alcohol, right? So that's the assumption. But I always confirm that assumption with the client. And I will ask, like, hey, anything that you don't want photographed, you know, do you want me to avoid people putting, you know, having food in their mouths? Do you want me to avoid people holding wine glasses or alcohol glasses or red Solo cups, depending on, you know, how fancy the party is? anytime you get the client to buy in on the answer, that's CYA, cover your ass. And then that way, you've kind of got your marching orders. Like, okay, I'm not photographing that. Because the problem of it is depending on the party, and believe me, corporate parties people can get pretty stupid. I've been at many a corporate party where very high up people in companies have committed career suicide with their stupidity, primarily because of alcohol, right? So you'll even run into situations where if there's alcohol and people are getting a little bit tipsy, where, they'll be insistent. It's like, come on, just get a picture of us, with a glass. And sure, you could take it and then delete it and not give it to the client, but ultimately you don't want to take it because God forbid if, the boss, the client that you're working for actually sees you take that shot and that. So yeah. You kind of worry about that. Joe just mentioned when he photographs political dinners, the politicians generally put their drinks down. And indeed, politicians are, most politicians are much more aware of appearances. But at corporate events, that's not always going to be the case. That's the thing. So John said, what are your thoughts on what a successful / iconic photo? I tend to gauge one based on my emotional response first. All the technical stuff is secondary. Listen, gang, for me, so John, I'm going to answer your question, but it's got nothing to do with iconic photos. I am not into photography because of the physics of photography. The physics of photography are the requirements, the tools that we use, as are the cameras, the lenses, the lighting, etc. I am into my number one priority in my photography is the people that I get to experience. That is my number one priority, right? And so for me, yeah, when I look at an iconic image or if an image is mine is successful, it's the creative elements. It's, the finished product in general, but I promise you it's got nothing to do with exposure or ISO or noise or composition or any of that kind of stuff. Do all of those elements exist in the picture? Well, of course, because they're part of the physics of photography, but they are not my priority, which again is why, most of you that are truly struggling, that have been shooting for quite a long time, but you're still taking crappy pictures and it's frustrating you, it's because you still haven't mastered the basics. So all your bandwidth is going to the basic stuff to get the camera settings right. And then by the time you're done that, it's like, I better take the picture. And you're not putting enough thought into the picture itself. I mean, legit, believe me, in my talk knowledge community, the overwhelming number of images that I look at, that's the problem, right? It's just, good photography, folks. I'm sorry, but it is. Good photography is a thinking man's process, right? It involves a lot of thinking. A couple weeks ago, I'm going to do it again tomorrow night, actually, in my talk knowledge community. I did a breakdown of some newspaper assignments that I had done and basically walked through the entire assignment from the time I walked into the building to the time I left, what my thought process was, why I did what I did, all that kind of stuff, just so that people could understand just how much thinking is really going on. And in the course of doing that, I also showed how my exposures as I went through this assignment were extremely consistent. Sure, there's some variation. Every now and then there was one bad one, right? But my exposures were extremely consistent. And that's the result of understanding the technology and nailing the technology so that it's an extension of your thought process, right? All right, Nick, here's this question. This is going to be my last question for the night, guys. We're just about at the end here. The difference between the ACR, Adobe Camera Raw basic modular sliders and curve sliders seems similar, but different. Not sure how to articulate the difference. Well, they are because they kind of do two different things, Nick. I personally, I don't use the curves. It's a very rare situation where I'll use the curves. What you will find if you kind of ask around to a whole bunch of photographers, some people swear by them, some people hate them. I think more people hate them than swear by them, but because I know the kind of stuff that you shoot, Nick, I will say that if you get into doing, luminosity masks and things like that, you will work more in curves. But for my work, especially my studio work, I never touch curves. And honestly, the majority of my location work, I never touch curves. Usually, I wind up using curves more if I'm working on somebody else's picture and trying to fix some kind of mistake that happened. But beyond that, I'm not a big fan of curves. But my photography doesn't benefit from them as much. Again, I don't know if you've ever been in one of my processing classes, Nick, but the sliders that I don't use exposure, I don't use contrast. I process my files in the basic panel, but with highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. That's where the magic is, right there. And of course, I give the software well exposed files. That's important, right? Because in today's mirrorless camera world, you have no excuse, any of you, to not have well exposed files. I mean, we're all going to have the occasional miss, right? Sure. But beyond that, there's no excuse for poor exposure. All right, gang. That about wraps it up for tonight. Seriously, thank you. It was nice to actually get back into some Q&A. I love doing the rapid fire Q&A. So I hope you found some value on what we shared tonight. Remember, you're not getting any younger. You've got less time than you did yesterday. So go pick up your camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. Go do the work. Adios, gang. Take care.